The waters north of the Philippines became, for a single clear morning in May 2026, a stage for a new chapter in Indo-Pacific security during the annual Balikatan exercises Allied forces, Philippine American. And for the first time in this particular role, Japanese brought together shipborne and shore-based systems in a live fire drill that was as much political signaling as it was military training. What unfolded off the coast was simple in its mechanics and complex in its consequences. Japanese Type 88 anti-ship missiles were fired, and a retired Philippine warship, the BRP Quezon, was struck and sent to the sea. The impact of that moment reached beyond the splash. It showcased a shift from diplomatic statements and joint communiques to operational integration, the hard practice work of aligning sensors, targeting data, communications, and weapons effects. Senior leaders followed the event closely. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. monitored developments from Manila, while Defense Secretary Gilbert Teodoro and Japan's Defense Minister Shinjiro Koizumi watched from the exercise range itself as missile salvos found their target roughly 75 kilometers offshore. In Teodoro's own words, "I'm very, very proud and happy that we were able to pull this off for the first time, and it will only get larger in scope with more partners. What happened in those minutes has technical, tactical, and strategic dimensions." The weapon at the center of the demonstration, Japan's Type 88 surface-to-ship missile, is a truck-mounted coastal defense system designed to engage hostile vessels at ranges measured in tens to a few hundred kilometers. It approaches its target at very low altitude, skimming the sea to reduce radar detection and compress response windows for defenders. The warhead is designed to pierce and fragment, delivering lethal effects against medium-sized ships. In modern naval thinking, such weapons are not judged solely by top speed. Their danger comes fro. Men-low observability, electronic warfare resistance, and the ability to be launched in coordinated salvos that saturate a ship's defenses, those operational realities were visible during Balikatan. Radar units, fire control platforms, and command nodes collaborated with Western and Japanese systems to identify, track, and prosecute a maritime target. Multiple missiles launched in sequence and from different bearings struck the decommissioned corvette, once a U.S. wartime vessel, and later the BRP Quezon, and the ship ultimately sank. For military planners, the exercise delivered critical practice, tracking a moving maritime target from disparate sensors, coordinating rules of engagement across national lines, and rehearsing the logistics of reloads and battle damage assessment. For policymakers, it was a public demonstration that the alliance network in the region can assemble complex strike effects on relatively short notice. The symbolism was layered. Balikatan, a long-standing PHI, Philippine U.S. exercise whose name means shoulder to shoulder, has always aimed to refine interoperability and reassure partners. Japan's direct participation in an overseas live anti-ship missile firing marks a step outward from purely defensive postures toward more assertive operational cooperation with allies. For Tokyo, the exercise reflects choices made in recent years to expand the role of the self-defense forces, deepen intelligence sharing, and accelerate defense procurement and planning. For Manila, it responds to an acute political calculus to deter coercion at sea and to strengthen the means by which it can protect maritime rights and resupply isolated outposts. That calculus exists against the backdrop of one of the planet's most contested maritime theaters. The South China Sea is a tangle of overlapping claims, strategic seabed resources, and vital trade routes. Beijing asserts expansive maritime rights through the so-called 9-dash line, claims that collide with the EA. Exclusive economic zones of the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and others. Those diplomatic and legal contests have been coupled with physical measures, island reclamation, Coast Guard patrols, and increased naval presence. Manila has repeatedly reported harassment and interference with civilian and supply vessels operating near disputed shoals and features, and Allied drills are often framed in part as responses to those pressures. Not surprisingly, Unsurprisingly, the missile strike produced sharp reactions. Beijing protested the Japanese action, warning that Tokyo's expanding military posture risks violating its post-war self-defense constraints and inflaming regional tensions. Chinese officials highlighted historical sensitivities around any increase in Japanese military activity, and Beijing cast the exercise as provocative. Those words speak to deeper strategic distrust. When one side adopts more visible coercive capability, others interpret it through a prism of threat and contingency P, landing. Yet, among governments from Tokyo to Manila and Washington, the prevailing logic is deterrence through demonstrable capability and cohesion. The supporters argue that visible practiced interconnectedness between allied systems reduces the risk of miscalculation by making clear what the consequences of hostile action would be. If an adversary contemplates coercive behavior at sea, the argument runs a credible and visible alliance network raises costs and complicates calculations of success. The technical aspects of the missile system used during Balikatan illustrate why such demonstrations matter. The sea skimming profile reduces radar signature and shortens the reaction window, particularly near complex coastal clutter. A semi-armor piercing fragmentation warhead concentrates destructive energy to critical ship systems. Although the Type 88 is subsonic, its lethality increases dramatically when used as part of a coordinated salvo. Multiple missiles arriving from different vectors can overwhelm a ship's layered defenses, especially if electronic warfare systems are stressed or if early warning is degraded. Recent conflicts have reinforced that point. Analysts often point to instances where advanced naval defenses have failed to stop coordinated anti-ship strikes when circumstances favor the attacker. At the same time, those capabilities do not exist in a vacuum. Japan has been fielding newer systems alongside the Type 88, adapting to evolving threats with improved countermeasures and communication resilience. The exercise also reflected the importance of logistics. Reload units, transporters, and redundant command platforms are essential for sustained operations. Interoperability is as much about common procedures and compatible encryption as it is about hardware. Drills like Balikatan let allied staffs refine these thorny details under realistic conditions. Political and historical threads intersected with the operational story. The BRP Quezon car. Symbolic freight, a vessel with prior service under a different flag, its final role as a target linked past alliances to present security arrangements. For Philippine leaders, the spectacle also addressed domestic audiences. Demonstrations of allied backing and improved maritime capability can shore up public confidence that the government can defend national interests. For Japan, the step reflected a broader reorientation. A post-war pacifist framework has been gradually adjusted as Tokyo confronts a security environment it characterizes as the most severe in the post-war era. Increased defense budgets, reconfigured doctrine, and more proactive engagement with allies are tangible manifestations of that shift. Those shifts produce both reassurance and concern. Proponents of visible military drills argue they reduce the likelihood of miscalculation by clarifying what red lines look like. Critics warn that such displays might accelerate arms competition or harden adversarial stances, making diplomatic resolution of disputes more elusive. The tension is real and unresolved. Deterrence requires capability and will, but showing those things in contested spaces can be read as escalatory. Beyond the immediate players, the Balikatan strike is an example of how coastal defenses are being reframed as network nodes rather than purely national bulwarks. Missile batteries, radar sites, and shore-based command centers increasingly integrate into alliance architectures that pool sensors and distribute targeting. That integration offers defenders advantages, broader situational awareness, faster engagement chains, and more resilient command options, but it also raises questions about escalation management. When multinational force packages tracked as strike operations near disputed waters, the potential for misperception grows. Even well-planned exercises can be misread as preparations for conflict unless accompanied by clear diplomatic communication. The exercise lessons coup. T across doctrine, procurement, and diplomacy. On the doctrinal side, navies and coast guards must revisit assumptions about layered defense, reaction timelines, and cross-domain effects, including how air, surface, and electronic warfare assets contribute to maritime decision-making. Procurement decisions will be influenced by what joint drills reveal about gaps, whether a partner needs surveillance aircraft, missile boats, shore-based radars, or secure data links. Diplomatically, capitals must balance public signaling with the quiet work of back-channel reassurance to prevent routine exercises from becoming flashpoints. History, too, plays a role in how these actions are perceived. For many observers in the region, memories of past conflicts, colonial histories, and wartime grievances inform contemporary mistrust. Japan's increased military activity is viewed through a particularly sensitive historical lens in parts of Asia, and Chinese narratives about regional security often draw those memories to justify objections. Domestic politics also shape how leaders present and defend these policies. Assurances to foreign partners can be framed as necessary for national survival, while opponents may accuse governments of recklessness. For the Philippines, the operational benefits of strengthened interoperability are straightforward: greater ability to monitor and, if necessary, deny access to strategic areas, enhanced readiness for humanitarian and disaster responses, and a stronger deterrent posture against harassment at sea. For Japan, the exercise is part of a broader shift to transform the self-defense forces into a capability set able to operate with partners at range and under high-intensity scenarios. For the United States, such drills reinforce long-standing commitments while serving the allied aim of shared responsibility for regional stability. What remains uncertain is whether these tactical improvements will produce the strategic stability their proponent seek. Visible demonstrations of capability can deter, but they can also provoke countermeasures, increased patrols, accelerated shipbuilding, or more assertive posturing from adversaries. The balance between deterrence and escalation is delicate, and it will depend as much on diplomacy as on missiles and sensors. As the waters healed from the day's detonations and the after-action reports began, one message stood out: Allied maritime cooperation in the Indo-Pacific has moved from practice into execution. Exercise that once focused on humanitarian assistance and search and rescue now routinely incorporate complex strike coordination, joint targeting, and live fire integration. This evolution reflects shifting threat perceptions and a shared desire among partners to ensure freedom of navigation and the security of sea lines of communication that sustain global trade. In the end, the sinking of the BRP Quezon was more than the loss of an old hull. It was a deliberate, calibrated demo. Demonstration that modern alliances can assemble precise maritime effects when required. It spoke to new levels of trust in sharing sensitive, targeting information, to the interoperability of systems from different manufacturers and doctrines, and to the political will to present a united front. It also underscored the perennial truth of maritime strategy. Control of the sea is exercised through a combination of presence, capability, and the will to use them. And those elements, when woven together across national lines, change the calculations of competitors and partners alike. The challenge now shifts to the capitals that watch the exercise closely. How will Tokyo, Manila, Washington, and Beijing interpret and respond to this demonstration of allied capability? Will it become a stabilizing deterrent, reducing risky behavior at sea? Or will it accelerate a cycle of countermeasures and denials that raises the risk of confrontation? The answers will depend not only on the refinement of missile tactics and the distribution of sensors, but on the diplomatic choices made in the calm that follows the flash. For sailors and soldiers who trained that day, for policymakers who weighed the risks and benefits, and for the millions whose livelihoods intersect with these waters, the message was unmistakable. The architecture of Indo-Pacific maritime security is changing, and it is doing so not only in strategy papers and budget lines, but in live fire ranges and sinking ships. Whether those changes make the region safer or more precarious will be determined in the months and years to come. By the way, alliances are managed by the restraint of rivals, and by the restraint of rivals and by the hard work of merging political prudence with operational